If you own Palantir or SoFi stock, you need to be paying very close attention because the market right now is going back and forth, and it looks like Donald Trump or Jerome Powell is trying to get a bit of a dip on the market. Now, pay very close attention because I believe one of these has real potential in the short term, but I still believe overall you're in a good position, but you do need to keep your head on a swivel with the other name. Let's get to work. So the first one we're going to start with is going to be SoFi. I'll go into Palantir in the second half of the video. Now, again, I've done a deeper dive into what's going on with their earnings, what to expect, and everything in between. But it's important to understand what's actually going on here and what you should be looking at. So the first thing to understand is what's going to be happening with their earnings, which take place on October 31st. So right now you're expected to get a move at around here, right here. Current data suggests the market is pricing in a potential post-earnings swing of nearly 14%, either direction for options on October 31st, which is well above the average move of 7% over the past 4 quarters. So what does this mean? So just going into earnings, if you want to make any money, and I always think trading earnings is a very risky decision and you really shouldn't do it. But when you look at SoFi stock, basically they're saying, look, if you want to make any money on options, you at least got to move around 15% of the stock. So give or take, if earnings were tomorrow, you'd have to move all the way into 30 or you have to move down into 25 just to make money on those options. And worth mentioning, the average move is only around 7%, which is really only about, in this case, would be give or take like $1 and maybe 80 cents in either direction. So it shows you what's really going on there as well. So again, when you get big moves like you have in the past few months since your last earnings, again, going into the next earnings, it's going to be, and there's going to be an expectation of more volatility, which a lot of us don't really think about. But it's also important to understand that they are having great growth, right? They are set to have one of their best earnings that they've ever had. If you go back to their past earnings, you look at something here at the daily and you go look at past earnings. So, beginning of this year, they did 740 million. The next quarter, 770. The next quarter, 850. They are growing good. Like they're on pace to do $1 billion in earnings. Very, very important to understand what's actually going on there. It's a solid company. The other part is actual growth, because when you get behind some of these cheaper names, they got to have the growth to justify the move. Now, what I will say, another very important metric here is if you go look at SoFi, we'll come back to this, but again, just in their last quarter, they did $858 million on the quarter. So they're on pace. Let's say they only do 800 million on average a quarter. They're on pace to do $3.2 billion a year. Okay, you go check this out. You go look, their market cap is sitting around $33 billion. So they're doing $3.2 billion a year. That's a simple 10x multiple, give or take. Very important to understand, you're still getting some value on this name. You go look at the other multiples. I can give you a few examples, and something like that's very hyped right now, which again, maybe it's a bad example, but I'll give it to you, is INOQ. So INOQ is a quantum name, which again, it's a lot of forward-looking guidance of what's happening there and expectation, and I think it's overvalued, but they're doing $21 million in earnings. So in comparison, we'll even bump them up. Let's say they're doing $100 million a year in sales, which they're not, but let's say they are. You go look at a name like this and you type in INOQ, it's important to understand that this company is actually worth $25 billion. The numbers don't add up in comparison. So when you look at a name like SoFi, you understand you're actually still getting value. You're still buying it at only a 10x multiple, where some of these other companies and names get to the point of 100, 200x what their actual valuation should be. That's just giving you, for instance, so you can actually see what's taking place there, so you know what's going on. So a few good things that you have going on with SoFi compared to some of these other stocks, and why I think buying on dips actually makes logical sense. Number one, earnings are growing. Right? And I want to highlight, you're not really in that position yet to where you're going to see the max benefit of their earnings, right? Because as we continue to cut rates, as we continue to see ultimately stocks come, we see interest rates come down, where you're going to see names like SoFi and Upstart and Affirm and bank names, or people that revolve around loans and finance. They're going to get more and more business, traffic will increase, and revenue will increase as well. And so you're going into the end of the year with the expectation of more cuts. Mortgage rates continue to come down below 6%, ideally by the end of the year. This puts SoFi in a good position. So we have a few things going on here that are great. You have great growth, pretty consistent growth, and then you have the fundamental side that's also benefiting them. Awesome. So again, as far as buy zones on the chart, they still remain the same if you were here in the last video. Now, the last video we talked about it here at $25. That was your buying opportunity. Now, you can also see this yellow line is your 50-day moving average. And if you're unfamiliar, you really just go to SMA, it's simple moving average, or if you're on a broker, just type in MA, moving average, and make sure you pin that to your daily chart, no other time frames, and it's a 50 and the 200. So the 50, you're grinding above it. That is what you would like to see. If you can start mounting above 28.5, I think you're working back in all-time highs in a hurry. Now, should you buy this before earnings as far as options? I'm going to leave that to you. But I think stock-wise, it makes sense. It's a good name. Buy zones 24.7, 22.5, and down to the 200 SMA is personally what I would be looking at for buying opportunities. And if you came back to your 200 SMA, it would be a load the boat opportunity for myself. Going into another name like this, and I would just like to say, these earnings numbers give me like Robinhood vibes. I'm just going to tell you that right now, which some people might not agree with, but important to understand. But also going back in here, not only are they growing as far as revenue, but they're also growing here on their members for their actual platform, like we talked about in the last overall video. So very important to understand what's going on. They're poised to grow. They're poised to have good earnings. You're in a really good position as a stock. You love to see it. Okay. SoFi, definitely one of my best names out there, okay? And again, I think it's in a very, very good position. Anyone saying this is a bubble or going to crash and burn, I genuinely believe this is one of those companies that is set up for success. And again, where you're actually operating their business, personal loans, credit cards, mortgages, well, here we go. Mega ad just got dumped on me. Investment accounts, banking services, financial planning. And they just added level 2 options as well to their platform, which is also very big. And it's important to realize how much they've actually grown as a company. If you were following them during their SPAC days when they just became public, half of these things weren't even there. So again, this is what you like to see. They're not growing as rapidly as something like Robinhood, which some of you might not like, but they're doing it very sustainably, meaning that they're focusing on what they can control and they're making sure that they're doing it the right way. So it's also not a company that I think that you're going to have any scandals to where you're just going to wake up one day and be like, oh my God, my SoFi is all gone. I don't think that's going to happen. It could happen, but I don't think it's going to. The next stock is going to be Palantir, PLTR. So again, SoFi, we love it. I'll come back, show you some target scenes like that in a second as well. But Palantir, I don't think Palantir is bad. I want to make sure I highlight that. So the first thing we've talked about is, and I've talked about it before here also, is you want to see that retest of the 50 MA on 169, and you did. Like we saw that actually today. So you bounced off that. Awesome to see. Considering how aggressive some of the selling has been on something like SPY, giving you an example of what's happened here, it's important to realize you saw some aggressive selling here on the S&P 500. Palantir has held up its ground. Like, very important to actually understand this. You're just kind of consolidating at all-time highs. And the other thing about Palantir is, if I was expecting names to get hurt, it would be the names that were moving almost parabolically to the upside over the past few months and years. And Palantir has been that over the past year and a half. It's almost only gone up, right? And eventually it will go down. Eventually you're going to see an aggressive sell-off. That will eventually happen, but hopefully not today. But Palantir is just grinding on its 50 MA. Now, if we start seeing a daily time frame getting below this, I could see some pain stepping in, but ultimately you have so much support at the 155 level. I'm really not even that concerned just yet. Now, where things get more interesting is you start looking at what's happening here. So I'm going to go into a few of these things that have happened as far as their competition, but I also want to talk about what happened here. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about Cathie Wood selling her shares of Palantir. First of all, you need to understand Cathie Wood is constantly selling and buying stock. So I wouldn't panic over someone selling a stock you own. Number two, I would also not go into the mentality of if Cathie Wood sells, this is so bad. Cathie Wood, don't get me wrong. I'm not shitting on Cathie. She's a killer. She makes a lot of money. She has her own fund. Awesome. Kudos. Okay. However, this isn't 2021 anymore. In 2021, everything Cathie touched was gold because everything only went up, and 2021 was a beautiful, beautiful time. So again, Cathie, who cares? I don't care that she sold, to be totally honest. We're thinking if you have a lot of Palantir stock, you bought at $20 and you're at $180 now. I mean, yeah, I'd probably take a little bit of profits too, but do what you want, okay? But Palantir, what have they been doing this year? Now, Palantir, everyone was telling me that Palantir was going to go to the trash can. Remember, there was the fear of the U.S. government cutting spending, the Pentagon cutting spending, but it seems like Palantir is only making more. it seems like they're only getting better deals, and it seems like they're only getting more money coming in. And that's the craziest part here. So again, it's very important to understand what's actually happening behind the scenes here and the companies are going against and how good they're doing. Now, they also have those two sides that they're working on. The first area, the likes and Ondural, butchering that name, Shield AI, Rebellion, Defense, Integrators, Bose Allen, Leidos. These are all basically companies trying to dominate on the AI front. So they're working on two different sides. Very important to understand. Okay. Now, I always say this is like the California gold rush is one of the main things I try to talk about, right? Is you have these companies that are going out to California to try to mine all the gold and make all the money. Awesome. Now, a lot of those companies are going to go bust. That's very important to understand. Some of them that are going out there and they're going to make a lot of money off the gold rush and they're going to kill it and they'll have long-term success. But then you have the other companies that are selling the tools. And that is also where Palantir is also making their money from. And they're going against companies like Databricks, Snowflake, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, and they're doing really well there. So it's important to understand they're working on both fronts there and they're doing solid. That's the reason why their earnings continue to do very well. And again, Palantir is one of those names. Now, I will say, if I look at SoFi and look at their valuation, you're like, okay, well, SoFi, like it's only a 10x multiple of their, earnings a year, right? Palantir did 827 beginning of the year, and then they did 883, and then they did 1 billion. Their earnings are doing great. Like they're doing, I can't highlight that enough. They are growing. And this is what I continue to say. Everyone that kept saying Palantir was a bubble, you might not be wrong. I do think there's a lot of AI bubbles out there. However, when you're a name that's operating off of growth and like that's how your stock is moving, is you continue to grow rapidly. Go look at Nvidia. That's what took Nvidia from being a top 10 name to being the number 1 name in a matter of a year. It was because of its growth and how much revenue they were bringing in. But when you're doing that and you can justify it, it starts to justify a very large forward-looking guidance on the value of a company. And so again, do I think Palantir is overvalued? Probably. I'd be dumb to not say that. Is it going to keep going up if they keep destroying earnings? 100%. So they literally have a 400x valuation, 100x valuation. Because let's rough ball and say they do 1 billion a quarter. We can even say a 420%, 420x, right? Something along those lines. But still very, very high. Important to understand that. Now, the question is, will they ever meet back up with that? We'll see. But overall, I'd be watching Palantir here as well. Now, as far as levels of what I'd be watching, I do think if Palantir dips, it's one of the best buys out there. And as far as AI leaders that are actually like using AI for real world solutions, Palantir is going to be one of the top dogs and the big winners in this over the long haul. They just are. They've solidified all their contracts with the United States government, and then they branched out from there. And let me tell you, when they solidified it with the U.S. government, they did a hell of a job because, again, they are dominating on that front. And I said it since the beginning. If there's anyone you want to work with, it's probably the U.S. government because once they bet big on you, typically, your success is kind of driven there as well. So again, Palantir, as long as it's above the 50 MA, I think it looks fine. If we start breaking 169, I do believe the downside here all the way down into 156. This is a critical level, 156 to 157. I would be watching that like a absolute hawk. Below that, 145, 146. Those are your big levels you need to be watching. Now, if by some chance you dip even further, you'd probably come down to 125. You'd skip 133, I would assume, and come towards 130, 125, which is the 200 SMA, or maybe that'll be a little bit higher by the time you actually get a dip, if you do get a big dip. But as of right now, if I'm looking at both of these names, I am welcoming a dip. I don't think you get an aggressive dip on SoFi. I could totally be wrong. I want to highlight that right now. I also think if the market holds up, you really don't see a dip on Palantir. And by these next earnings, we're not looking at 180 anymore, and we're looking at $200, whether you like it or not. And another thing you could be doing is looking at something like IWM, because despite seeing some of the rough patches you're on with SPY and QQQ and the Dow, the Russell, the mid-cap ETF, right? No one's really talking about it, or the mid-cap index is breaking all-time highs today. Today, the IWM, which again is heavily led by a lot of AI and quantum names and what's happening there. but it's still got to be watching this. This is very exciting where you're at, and I do think there's major opportunity on the horizon with these names. Hopefully, if you have any questions, I answered all of them in the video. More videos coming out. Again, SoFi, I was talking about price targets. Again, all I want to see is above 28.5, and I think you're pushing into all-time highs. There you look happy. You already know where I'm buying at, everything in between. Have a good one, traders. Discord link, Twitter links all down below. I recommend following on Twitter so you get all these updates as they come in. I post all the charts, all the updates for you as well. Have a good one. See you tomorrow.